15th Finance Committee meeting. We'll call that to order along with Councilman Michael Holmes and Councilman Victor Jones. I believe Councilwoman Peters is on the way, so she will be joining us shortly, but we have a quorum and we're going to jump right into the presentation of items. And we'll start with item 2023-286 for a consideration about an upset bid. We'll hear from Kim Thor, our right-of-way coordinator.
Hello.
Hi.
Hope y'all are doing well. We have an opportunity to sell to American Property Services Company a property at 810 East Russell Avenue. It's a vacant lot that consists of approximately 0.23 acres or 10,019 square feet. $7,500 is what's offered if we can get approval for upset bid on this.
Anybody got questions? I've got one. American Services, do we know, other than that's their name, do we know who they are?
Yes, we do. We've sold to them before, and they do build affordable housing in Greensboro and in High Point.
And they're based out of Greensboro?
Yes, based out of Greensboro.
All right. Anybody else have questions? I'll make a motion for approval of item 2023-286. There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion passes. Thank you, Ms. Thor. Next item is 2023-287. This is concerning our ARPA funds and interest, and we'll hear from Bobby Fitzjohn.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Typically, federal grants are awarded on a reimbursement basis, which means we spend the money first and then we ask for reimbursement. As you know, the $22.7 million we received through ARPA were given to us in advance. Over the time that we had those funds as ARPA funds, they accrued about $127,000 of interest income. They did have to be kept separately, but there are no restrictions on what those funds can be used for. Staff is proposing to use those funds for one-time capital expenditures. The two purposes that we've laid out in front of you for the $127,000 are third floor flooring replacement at the High Point Library. This is actually going to complete their year 2 request that was made for fiscal 25, so that they'll be able to bring that forward and make those improvements sooner. The balance of $50,000 will be allocated to playground and park equipment, which is a reoccurring capital request that you all most recently affirmed as part of your 24 budget request.
Is that playground park equipment for a specific park or just general?
I think it's general. In fact, Mr. Tillery is here. I'm sure he has a schedule of way out of needs for equipment. I don't know that it's programmed for a specific park or playground, but it will go towards that purpose.
Sure.
Just for the record, the ARPA funds, and if not them, the interest, you talked, say that in the beginning about the typically, and then we pay it back. Is that still applicable because of the exception of COVID and ARPA funds and this interest? Is there any legs to that have to go back at a certain point?
No, sir. So typically, what I was trying to explain was that federal grants are awarded on a reimbursement basis,
Right.
so we don't get the money up front.
Right.
So there's never any interest accumulated on those grant funds.
Right.
In this case, interest accumulated, and by law, we had to attribute interest to this, and now we can utilize that interest income for any purpose, any governmental purpose. There's no requirement that it go back to the Fed.
No, okay.
Yeah.
If there's no further comments or questions, I'll make a motion for approval of item 2023-287.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion passes. Next item is 2023-288. This also is a budget ordinance, and we'll hear from Bobby.
Thank you again. You all may remember this from last year and years prior. There are certain items or transactions that occur during the year that we have to treat as a capital purchase. So last year, there were some leases we entered into that met that standard. This year, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board is requiring that we include subscription-based IT arrangements and treat them like we are purchasing a piece of equipment. So this is when we've entered into multi-year agreements for software. Some examples would be Microsoft Office 365, typical things you may all use in your workplace. It also includes, the Rubicon software that tracks public service trucks and all that. So this ordinance allows us to properly record us entering into those agreements. It does not allow us to expend any more than you all have previously approved. It just allows us to properly account for those new standards. Yep, it's really fun.
Sometimes the things that are asked of
Yeah.
y'all just make me shake my head. Anyway, it is what it is. Any comments or questions on this item? Hearing none, I'll make a motion to approve item 2023-288. There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. Next item we're going to hear is 2023-289, and we're going to hear from Assistant City Manager Eric Almeida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. The taxi rates in High Point are set by the city council. We've had representatives from both companies request that council consider raising rates. Rates have not been raised since 2008, and based on current gas prices, insurance cost, and just the cost of maintenance on those vehicles is part of the justification for raising those rates. And also what they've requested is that we have raised the rates to match what Greensboro charges, which they raised their rates back in November of 2022. So the rate change would go from a pickup fee of from $2.80 to $3.80, a fare per mile from 30 cents to 40 cents, and then a waiting fee of 30 cents a minute to 40 cents a minute. So those are the rate changes that they are requesting, and staff recommends that council consider that and approve that.
Eric, with the onset of Uber, Lyft, every other ride shares, public transportation, what is really the market for traditional taxi cabs today? Can we gauge what the ridership and consumption is?
I can't gauge. I can rely on anecdotal evidence, I guess. And Mr. Ali from Yellow Cab that I spoke to a few weeks ago, the clientele that uses a taxi cab are generally older, don't have smartphones, or may not have credit cards. They're on a cash basis. And he said a lot of his population are taking trips to and from medical facilities. So he said it's a pretty vulnerable population that really needs this support. A population that can't really rely on public transportation, that needs that point-to-point service more than just having a fixed route service with a bus, or relying on a technology-based service like an Uber or
The reason I
Lyft.
asked that, I figured that's probably the population that is consuming taxi cabs. It may seem nominal, but do you think a fee increase would be damaging to older folks who may be on a fixed income, or possibly damaging to those folks?
And Mr. Ali, we spoke about that, and he said, while it may be detrimental, it'd be a lot more detrimental if he has to pull out of High Point because he can't operate. So that was kind of the trade-off.
Yeah, that's always the double-edged sword of that. What's the biggest loss and impact to that population if they're vulnerable? Is the fee increase or not having transportation whatsoever? Okay, thank you.
Question, that 386 or whatever, is that like a fee not to exceed, or can a cab company charge less than that if they wanted to?
They could, I believe they could certainly charge less to that. It's a not to exceed if one chose to not go up to that maximum rate.
Okay, so if they felt, as long as we're given permission to charge up to 386, if they felt like they were getting consensus from their customers that it was really negatively impacted, they could say, we're only going to do 325 or something like that. They can leave it up to the business owner.
There's nothing in the ordinance that states that they have to charge that.
Okay.
How many cab companies do we currently have operating?
Currently, we have just two.
Just two. Yeah, so, at that point, it's not really any price differential competition that would keep the price down. I guess it could, being direct competitors to one another, but, probably not, we probably just raise equal.
Anything else? All right, I will make a motion for approval of item 2023-289.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Next item is 2023-290, and this is a pass-through extension request. Mr. Almeida?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last year, we received a $1 million grant from the state of North Carolina as a pass, and we passed it through to the Chamber of Commerce for their Thrive Minority Entrepreneurship Initiative. In the original paperwork of that, we had asked for that to be effective through June 2026. However, when everything was finalized, it was a one-year grant. We have received the funds and worked with the state to make sure that we can have an agreement between the city and the chamber to extend that to the 2026 date, and they are fine with that. So this is just asking that council approve an extension that covers from now until July 1st, 2026. To date, they've spent about $155,000 of those dollars. So they've got a balance of about $845,000. But it was always intended to be a multi-year spend down of that. So we're just asking that we extend that to July 1, 2026.
And this was a state grant, not a federal grant.
Correct.
And there wasn't, prior to this, wasn't there like a deadline for at least 250 of it? It was like this month?
Not to my knowledge, not that there was a deadline to spend part of it,
Yeah,
not to my knowledge.
okay.
Anything else? I'll make a motion for approval of item 2023-290.
Second?
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you, Eric. Next item is 2023-291. This has to do with our High Point Public Library and Security Services, and we will hear from Mary Sizemore.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Hi. The library would like to enter into a 3-year contract with Security Solutions of America that would provide unarmed guards for the library during operating hours and for special after-hour events. We put our security services up for bid several months ago. We got 6 proposals. We narrowed it down to 2 and held additional interviews with this company. Security Solutions of America came out on top, and all the references were very positive. Council is requested to approve the 3-year contract in the amount of $96,025 for a 3-year period beginning July 1st, 2023, with the option to renew for 2 additional 1-year periods. We've budgeted $99,000 for security in the next fiscal year, so this is slightly under budget.
Say that last part again.
We budgeted we were anticipating $99,000
Yeah.
for the next, so the $96,000 is slightly under budget.
I just wanted to hear it. That's good.
Does that sound good? I'll say it again if you want.
Yeah, that's good. Any other comments? So this is for the total of 3 years?
Yes,
For the 96?
correct.
And are they all operating hours?
They are. We generally have 2 on site to cover the entirety, and on weekends, we just have 1. Weekends, Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays, we just have 1 on site.
Very good.
Okay?
Anybody else? I'll make a motion to approve item 2023-291.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see if this guy can say the same thing. Item 2023-292, we'll hear from Park Director Lee Tillery on some golf court leases.
I guess you don't think I can say the same thing?
We're going to find out.
Good afternoon. To answer your question real quick, Victor, we have what we call a playground prioritization list, going back to what Bobby was talking about with that ordinance. So it's just a rolling list based on condition of playgrounds and use, and we just roll through it as money is applied each year on those particular projects. So we don't have anything specific in mind for that one. It would just be in that same pot of money to go towards whatever's next on the project list. Mr. Chairman, we have before you a contract, a lease contract extension proposal from Easy Go for our golf carts and some other vehicles, utility vehicles at both golf courses. We've been with Easy Go for the last 9 years. If you guys will recall, we lease all of our golf carts at both golf courses. So there's 60 golf carts per course for a total of 120. Easy Go is on a purchasing contract with the city called Omnia. We've been with them again for the last, I think, 9 years. But the last 6 years, we have not had any type of price increase until now. But up to the previous 6 years, we have not had any increase from these guys. So they've been great to work with. Before you is a 59-month contract extension for a new fleet of vehicles. 120 carts, a range, beverage cart and shuttle cart for Ocala Golf Course, and then a Ranger carts, one for both Ocala and Blair Park, and again, 60 carts per course. Can't get that out. So again, we're looking at a 59-month extension, and the reason for that is kind of this new technology with the golf carts, but mainly the change to a lithium battery, which we hadn't had before in those carts. We get a 5-year warranty with those. They're going to provide new charging stations for us at each location, and we're able to accommodate that with both of our cart barns at each location. They're a little bit, they're less weight. They're 285 pounds lighter than the current carts that we have in place. So we feel like there'll be less impact, less wear and tear on our golf course, which is very important, especially if we're committing to a 59-month lease. This is an increase over what we have been paying. Our current contract runs up in October of this year, but they're looking at a 10-month lead time, somewhere on 9 to 10 month lead time to get the new fleet in. So once our existing lease runs out, then we'll go month to month with them at the same rate we've been paying until the new fleet arrives, and then we'll begin with the new lease payment. So we're projecting that to be somewhere between April and May of next year. And with this increase, I know we will be looking at probably tying in a cost increase with our fees for the golf courses as we look to the budget in 24-25 to accommodate the increase in what we're going to have to pay for carts. So we're in favor of this and would like for you guys to consider this. It's a 59-month lease. And it'll start again when the fleet arrives, thinking somewhere in April or May. But doing this now enables us to at least get that order in and at least get the carts ordered and ready to go. So we're recommending approval of this extension. And it is an annual fee of $209,149.96. Happy to answer any questions.
Lee, any idea projecting on what this will add to the fees, golf course fees?
I hadn't really looked at it in that much detail, Michael, but we'll start because this is a substantial increase. We try to, if you look at revenue generators within Parks and Recreation, it's the golf courses and the campground that bring in the most revenue for our department. So we look at our cost recovery, they're pretty high. We're somewhere close to 70% cost recovery at Ocala, a little bit less at Blair Park. So we want to try to keep those same ratios as we move forward. Now, we might not be able to do that with this increase, but we haven't had any major increase at the golf course in the last 3 years. We've made some adjustments to some fees, but we haven't had any major increases there.
What is our current fee?
Well, the fee schedule's like this long, Brett, so it's got different fees. Well, we keep it all really in one. We split it up budget-wise, but you're typically looking at around $16, $17 just on the cart, somewhere right in there.
How is that in comparison to most other courses? I mean, most of the municipalities in terms.
So that's a good
of,
question. That's what we do is we go in and we'll
Yeah.
compare where we are. I think the fees at Blair Park are towards the lower end. I think the fees for Oak Hollow are somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Now, for a Pete Dye design course like Oak Hollow is, that's probably one of the
Yeah.
most affordable Pete Dye
would
courses
say.
that you'll find, not only in the South, not only in the state, but probably in the South as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
So that's probably, we compare typically around in this area, Michael, to other courses, to other public courses. And again, I'd say the last time we checked, Blair was kind of on the lower end, Oak Hollow somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
One quick thing, you said the carts are 285 pounds lighter. Do these things come with a safety factor, safety rating? I mean, you know, riding down the course and
Yeah.
there's your ball and you hook a left.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, they do. I don't know how they spell that out, Brett. That's a good question. A lot of times, when we have problems with cart, it's due to user error or,
That's what I meant.
or late afternoon beverages, you know, so, but, they've held up pretty well, so,
kind of like going in turn 4 at Charlotte. You don't want to be too light, you know.
right.
Anything else? I'll make a motion for approval of item 2023-292.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Next item, 2023-293, has to do with the pre-designed services with the Parks and Rec, and Lee will continue.
Thanks, sir. This is a contract, a proposal for a contract with HH Architecture. HH is on our master list of architects. They've done work with us before, but we started talking with them about what, you know, they have a lot of experience with senior centers, so we started to have some conversations with them about really how to get started as we start to look at the new senior center or new center for active adults. If you guys will recall with Sea Lake Park, we already had a site master plan in place, so we really had a good idea of the design, what we really wanted to do, how we wanted to move forward with that plan. Just now, being able to locate where we want to put the senior center, know we're going to build vertical, new building. This particular phase would be one in which we do a lot of investigating, see if our site is going to work, which I think it will. But this pre-planning phase it's really threefold. One, it's architectural. You'll have the architectural experiences of HH looking at the entirety of the project, programming requirements, what the design's going to be, and in the end, they'll be able to get us a better cost estimate as we move forward before we start into design. They have a sub-consultant called Dewberry. They're out of Charlotte on this project, so they'll look at all the site and civil issues, where it can go, parking, anything to do with the land, developmental constraints, anything like that. Dewberry will be involved in that. Stormwater management. They'll also look at what we talked about when we started talking about the senior center, is those outdoor amenities. You know, if we can make it more of a campus feel, what does that look like around this area in and around Oakview? And then they'll bring on a senior center consultant, and this is a group called Lifespan. And they're out of Ohio, and they've helped with facilitating designs at a lot of senior centers across the country. So I'm pretty excited about bringing them in. So they'll do what we typically would do with a site master plan. So they'll come in and really try to get the pulse of the community. They'll have some public meetings, they'll meet with seniors at the senior center. They'll talk about universal design, they'll try to get a feel for what it is we really want in this building, and then try to incorporate that with HH in the design, and then whatever restraints or whatever we can do with the civil part of it. So I'm excited about bringing them on. They'll work with us, we'll be able to do surveys. I mean, I feel like we'll be able to get a good pulse of the community and what their wants and needs are as far as the senior center and how we can incorporate that into design. So that's kind of where we are with this. This is kind of what we're calling a pre-planning phase. The end result is for them to come back with 3 options to say, here's where you can go on this campus. You know, if you guys will remember, we have just over 17 acres there at Oakview that adjoin 503 James Road. And so they'll look at some different options. We had, initially we had some drawings that showed where some would go that Dewberry did for us. But this will be a little bit more detailed, be able to show some options on the site, and more importantly, give us an idea what that cost is going to be. when we're done, and any other constraints on that particular area. So we're recommending we do this phase before we get into the design phase, and I think this will give us a better idea of where we're headed and help us to really understand what's in front of us before we move into design.
How long do you think it would take for the, get your information back?
So we're looking at 6 to 7 weeks for this project, Britton.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
good.
It does seem pretty quick, I agree, but yeah, that's what we're looking at.
That's very good. Any other comments or questions on this item? Hearing none, I'll make a motion for approval of item 2023-293.
Second?
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Lee, you had a meeting Monday night concerning the overlook and the park side on East Chester.
Yes, sir.
How did that go?
It went well, and I think Michael was there, and we didn't have the turnout that, this was our second of 2 public meetings, Brett, for that plan. We didn't have a ton of turnout there, but we did have some people there, and I'm assuming it has, to do with start of summer and everything else. We had a lot of people at our first meeting. So what they did at that particular meeting was pretty much just put out a rendering to say, here's what we've learned to this point, here's what we think we can do in the park. And we had that ready for public input. We had some people come in and had the media there as well. So we talked a little bit about what was in that plan. Our Withers Ravenel, who's contracted with us to do that site plan, was on site, and they also presented to our Parks and Recreation Commission after that. The public meeting was from 4 to 5:30, and they presented at 5:30 at our Parks and Recreation Commission meeting. So it went well. It's ultimately, it will come to you guys, I think, in this case, for y'all's approval, but at this point, it's just still a rough draft, but at least we have a rendering in place now to be able to have a better idea of what we can and can't do there at Festival Park, and then what some of our opportunities are, and then what some of the things we need to work on.
That's
as well.
certainly an asset. If we can improve it, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's a really common sense but ambitious design for the park. It makes sense, a lot of the things that are in the rendering. And it also really opens up the possibilities for usage of the park. So I was really impressed by it. Got a few questions about it since that interview aired. So I think people are interested.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a great start. It's, they did a good job of really taking in all the input, not only from staff, but from the public too. And then they were involved with interviews with all interest groups of groups that utilize the park in a big way, from Uncle Sam Jam to the Coltrane Festival to our rowing groups, now a variety of rowing groups with HPU. So they did a good job. It was a pretty comprehensive approach to pulling that together.
I think we mentioned in an earlier conversation, please put a note and remember as the talks and stuff go on, as we approach the replacement of that dam, what effect it may have if we have to switch our water supply over to what
a great point.
activities
Yeah.
and timeframe that could encumber. And one last thing, you recently had a birthday, didn't you?
I did, yes, sir.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
Well, thank you.
Happy birthday,
I
Lee.
appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Where am I? Next item is 2023-294, and this is a consideration with a agreement on our NC DOT infrastructure, and I've got Andrew Edmonds.
Actually, I'm gonna fill in for Andrew today, so
Oh,
I changed it
well,
on you.
I got my glasses, all 4 eyes, and I didn't see it.
That's all right.
All right, Mr. Venable.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the City Council. As you said, this is a municipal agreement with NCDOT for RAISE grant funding to construct improvements to Elm Street and phases 1, 2, and 3 of the Southwest Heritage Greenway. As you remember, High Point submitted this project for consideration along with DOT and Southwest Renewal Foundation and was awarded 2021 RAISE funding by US DOT. Construction is anticipated to begin in fall of 2024 with an anticipated completion date of 2028, October 31st of 2028. The total cost of the project is just under $28.5 million. The city will budget and get reimbursed as work is completed. Of this amount, USDOT is responsible for about $19.8 million. There is a $1.5 million of community project funding, congressionally direct spending from U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development that's included, and $200,000 in spot safety from NCDOT. The city is responsible for the remaining project cost of just under $7 million. City Council approved FHWA's three-party agreement back in January 17th to seek funding authorization. This agreement is basically with NCDOT to allow us to submit for reimbursement from DOT for those funds as the project moves forward. So I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Anything? I'll make a motion for approval of item 2023-294. There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion passes. Okay, Greg, tell us about 2023-295.
Sure. So this is a contract with Alta Engineering. This is also for, again, covers phases 1, 2, and 3 of the Southwest Heritage Greenway, as well as Elm Street from Sunset down to Commerce. This is for engineering and design work. Request for qualifications were released in February. The City of High Point received 3 responses to the RFQ, of which Alta scored the highest from the selection committee. Design work associated with each phase can happen simultaneously, but it's understanding that Elm Street, the component 2, and is what we call in component 2, will be let for construction first. The award for this contract will be with the city for a period of 15 months. Hopefully we can get it done quicker than that, but that's what's going to be in the contract, and we'll begin it as identified in the contract as the start date. Alta will provide the described professional design services for a lump sum fee of $2,862,495.84. A budget ordinance amendment appropriating the federal and state grant awards is included with this item. Funds for water and sewer and electric items for the project will be covered by existing capital appropriations and future capital improvement program allocations. We're requesting the approval of the contract with Alta, and there's also a budget ordinance amendment that is included as well. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
And we can vote, this vote, Madam Attorney, will encompass both those items he just referred to. Okay. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, I'll make a motion for approval of item 2023-295.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Did you get in touch with Mark?
What's that?
Did you get in touch with Mark?
I did. Yeah, I talked to him, and we're going to look at some of that stuff he's talking about.
Thanks. Next item is 2023-296, and we're going to hear from Derek Boone, about our water pump station Force Main.
Good afternoon. The original contract for the Waterview Force Main Extension Project was awarded to Baker Underground back in May 2nd, 2022. We're near the end of the project. There have been 2 additional change orders, and so we're here to talk about change order number 3. Change order 3, we got a list there on the actual change order that kind of summarizes the additional work. I'll hit just some of the highlights. This change order, it adds 45 days to the contract. The 3 big items were the contractor ran into some corrugated metal pipe under Sunnyvale, and so it not shown on the plans, and it was buried, and so had to go in and perform some stormwater drainage improvements along Penny Road at Sunnyvale. Also, change order 2 included a boring under Eastchester and running along Skeet Club and tying in at White's Mill to extend the force main. And so we had to add a line stop to decrease the amount of time that Waterview Pump Station would be shut down. And so also boring under Eastchester, they hit significant amount of rock, 175 feet of rock. And so this will be the last change order. Project is nearly complete. And so we're requesting that council approve this change order in the amount of $165,610.39, and then the 45-day extension.
Specifically, where was the rock they hit?
I don't know exactly. I mean, it's a long run. I want to say it's at least 1,000 feet.
But you said it was under Eastchester?
It was, well, that section. So
I just noticed they were digging a lot where Wendover peels off.
that was where they were set up, pushing the pipe through, and so that was their main setup area.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Any other comments on this item? Hearing none, I'll make a motion for approval of item 2023-296.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes.
Thank you.
Anything else to come before finance? I just ask that staff consider that all budgets from now on be reviewed by Mary Sizemore before they go through. think that'd be a good idea. Yesterday was Flag Day. I hope everybody remembered that. And Sunday's Father's Day. And if your father is still with you, find him and hug him and give him a big old kiss. Nothing else before this Finance Committee, we will be adjourned. Thank you.